Добрий день, шановні пані та панове. Ось тут не розуміє.
Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, all right, so it's noon sharp. We have a very busy schedule indeed. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Valery Pyatnitsky, Government's Commissioner for European Integration. And I will introduce him in English also. There are some people watching us online.
Integration in the Ukrainian government, and we are very pleased to have him here. Так що
So, without any further ado, I would like to turn the floor to Mr. Pyatnitsky. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to see you, of course, and just a couple of words on the state of play in the European integration developments for Ukraine. Well, as you probably know, now we're having with the trade and economic relations, the autonomous preferences of the European Union, and such preferences were launched on the 23rd of April. We can discuss the first developments, and we'll summarize them at a later stage, I suppose, in a couple of months, perhaps, maybe at the end of the year. And very often people draw our attention to tariff quotas, speaking of agricultural produce and other elements people take into account. We can say that we can export poultry, and we can have some types of such products that under tariff quotas, and of course there are certain systems of licensing designed for them. At this point, our enterprises, together with their partners, European, of course, license 75% of all the scope set up for that. It's not bad for the first experience. 100% is always better. And moreover, when we say that we have to increase quotas, the scope of quotas, and supply more, but to supply more, to conduct negotiations, we have to use at least what we already have. And speaking of other types of meat products, it's a different situation. Our enterprises, our companies have no opportunity or right, rather, to export to the European markets, because of the lack of permits related to quality and safety standards. And that should be all based on certain changes in the legislation. And there, practically, the task of the government and the parliament is to adopt such legislation. It's about safety and quality, speaking of cattle, identification of animals, and also we can talk about fodder and high-quality feed for such animals. And that's the set of elements for the system of European control, safety and quality assurance, and the conditions of supply to the markets. On the other hand, speaking of other developments, trade is developing. The share of the EU is gradually and steadily growing. The preliminary results, even before the autonomous preferences for month, starting from the beginning of the year, this is a clear trend. The customs union share went down, the EU share came up. After that, the autonomous preferences are signed, it will be even more visible. The free trade area on the 27th, as we expect, and the association agreement is fully in effect. That will present different dynamics, not just for commodities, but also services in all the areas where we have cooperation between Ukraine and the EU. And I would like to conclude with this statement, and I would like to answer questions on trade and economic cooperation with the EU and prospects. If you have any, please. Yuri Panchenko, European truth, Европейская правда. Now we have certain preference after the economic part of the association agreement is signed. Will they disappear immediately or be prolonged till November? We hope sincerely that signing of the agreement and then that will be followed by ratification of the Parliament, and we'll be able to start implementation of this agreement starting from this autumn. What window of opportunity does it open? It's with tariff quotas, and we can use them twice. Now we're using them as autonomous preferences. As soon as the agreement is in force, they will be terminated, and we'll use the same quotas again, but under the agreement. This is a unique year. During 8 to 9 months, we can use a double scope of tariff quotas. On the other hand, the agreement itself opens a wider range for cooperation. We have to use the opportunity, of course, because we should not focus on just tariff preferences. We also have to work on a wider scope. And I think that in this case, we should not talk about prolongation of tariff preferences. If we look on the whole agreement or parts on free trade or the part on free trade, it's just about a couple of percent of all the agreement. Why should we prolong some percentage instead of using it in full capacity? For 2 years, the general system of preferences of the EU will be in effect. Under this general system, for specific items, access to the European market are even better than under autonomous preferences, and for the first 2 or 3 years. And there are certain such items. They are limited in number, but they are available. I am not getting deeply into detail, but EU tariff is gradually subsiding for 3 years from 10 to 0%. For the same commodity under the general system of preference, you have by 50 to 75% decrease. Such commodities, of course, are there. I think if you are interested in that, we can provide this information additionally.
I have a question to you. It is generally known that the major barriers for trade are not tariffs sometimes, but just barriers. And different states, for example, use the phytosanitary limitations or standards to limit supplies. For example, the United States now use this phytosanitary standards to limit supplies of food from Europe. Thus, this shows this is like commercial nationalism in some states. And what are some specific norms, or, for example, phytosanitary or others norms which could be used against Ukrainian suppliers of food and raw materials in Ukraine? Actually, those limitations, they are enforced on the eastern borders of our country. Phytosanitary rules and norms are the rules which ensure that supplied food is safe and of good quality. Actually, there is the general rule of common sense applied here. We need to approve high standards for the certification of cattle to be sure that meat and dairy products are of good quality from healthy cattle. And in case of any cattle disease, we should localize immediately this case and separate this cattle and prevent the poor quality of food. Actually, we have to change our mentality and understand properly that this is more important for us to be sure that our food products are of good quality, because we are primarily consumers of our domestic foodstuff. And we understand clearly that if some food products are not accepted in the European Union, they come back to Ukraine. And today, as of today, if you do not identify properly the origin of cattle in households, we cannot be sure that there is proper food safety in domestic market. We heard quite often that in this or that children's camp, the children got some diseases because of poor food quality. That's why it's in our interest to ensure the health of cattle, the health of people, and the health of households. Could you please comment on the attitude of Russia and inform us about negotiations on the event of signing the association agreement, and what will be the result? If you want to call each international meeting as a negotiations, then you may call this meeting as a negotiations. As of today, I do not see any subject for discussion on the topic about signing of association agreement between Ukraine and the EU. You know that the countries of the customs union have signed up the agreement, treaty about Eurasian Union, and probably if we want to have negotiations, we shall have negotiations with the Commission of the Eurasian Union. And do we wish to establish the DCFTA? It's not a subject for negotiations with the third party. This could be like an information about the association agreement. If our Russian or Eastern partners wish to know more about the contents of the agreement, the scope of the agreement, etc., then the agreement is available in the internet, both in English, in Ukrainian, I think even now in Russian. If they wish to know more from us, we can organize a workshop, a seminar, provide any explanation. Actually, this should not be negotiations, but just an exchange with information. My question is in the context of the economic diplomacy of Ukraine, and as soon as the agreement is signed, it will open an access to the huge market of 500 million of people. But actually, small and medium-sized companies, they now cannot understand properly how does the procedure of trade with the EU works. They do not understand the mechanisms. How do you see the solutions to this problem? If our medium-sized companies exported to Moldova, Russia, etc., they should be familiar with the Incoterms rules. If they do not speak European languages, I think this is a temporary shortcoming, and you can maybe not so easily and quickly, but you can correct the situation, resolve the problem. And the experience of our Baltic neighbors proves that even small countries, people in small countries can master foreign languages excellently, and they preserve this possibility of communication, even in Russian language, if you may not like it. If Ukraine becomes a more serious partner of those countries, they probably will learn even Ukrainian language. The Baltic companies, which obviously are not the industrial giants, they are mainly small and medium-sized enterprises, and they managed to do this. Even in the EU companies, the most common size of the company is around 12 people, and you may not believe it, but these companies are rather capable. They export many goods, and the governments in the EU, they establish many chambers of commerce, industrial commerce, and industrial chambers, and support such companies, and they provide financial support to the marketing activities, trade fairs and exhibitions activities. SMEs should find their niches in the domestic market. Our domestic market is not so small as SMEs may think. The largest companies, giants, can benefit much from the European market. We expect that Ukraine will become more interesting for investors, but this will take time, and this will require to resume trust, revive trust from the investors, because unfortunately we have ruined confidence of many investors that they should not fear unpredictability, should not fear unfair judiciary system, contract breach, etc. If we manage to convince Ukrainian SMEs that Ukrainian market is a proper place to operate for them, then they will be able to go to European market. Valery Pyatnitsky, it is well known that the outdated, obsolete technical standards are a huge obstacle for European integration. Upon signing the economic part of the agreement, how much time will Ukraine have to adapt its standards to technical standards to the EU, and or it will facilitate the process, etc. It should not be association agreement which should be facilitator of the process. Actually, there should be business who is able to speed up the process. Actually, back in early 2000s, when we were discussing WTO, we were speaking on this problem, and business contributes much here. But unfortunately, many reforms remained under-fulfilled, and I communicate very much with the SMEs. They themselves make delays in implementation of many standards. For example, association agreement allows delays in adoption of some standards till 2016, 2017, but business itself has no time for the delay. You can sell to any country, but when you wish to sell your products to the EU, you have got your license or certificate, but you cannot sell your products because of the technical standards. And in this situation, business will press upon the government to change legislation, to bring Ukrainian legislation in accordance with Canadian, the US legislation, European. Actually, this is the sign for us that our system does not correspond to the international one. For example, the customs service from the very day the DCFTA comes into force, starts to require a special certificate on the border. And the same story is with the products inside the country. If I'm a bureaucrat issuing a certificate to you about technical standards, which you do not need, and then that's your problem. So actually, the bell tolls to the system of the technical certification of Ukraine.
Sir, my name's Harvey. America. I'm a former land developer, and I saw the problems that you've had with real estate development in Ukraine. If you wish, I could share technical tools that would help improve the standards for investment in real estate development. We can share cards, exchange.
Thank you very much, and of course we appreciate all support which we can receive from any stakeholders who have real interest to develop the not only relations between Ukraine and EU, but really the market within the Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Пане Валерію, мене останнє таке запитання, мабуть, буде більш
Last question of the geopolitical aspect, perhaps, because of the conflict and because of the crisis between Russia and Ukraine, we now have convergence between the US and the EU. So Mr. Obama has it on his agenda signing an FTA with the EU, the transatlantic free trade agreement. Obama wants it to be his heritage after his resignation, and there are many debates in the EU and the US. There are very heated debates on that, but here's the question: can we somehow use this situation for the benefit of Ukraine, for the economic sake of Ukraine? I think if this happens and the EU and the US have this agreement, I think indirectly we'll be able to utilize it somehow, because at any rate our FTA is open-ended, because it's not just a set of benchmarks or conditionalities that we have to comply with or have to promote ourselves to. The European system is constantly developing, the European market, the European rules are developing, and it's in the agreement, the built mechanism for our participation with new requirements, with assistance from the EU. If you want to implement something, say, for the environment, environmental protection, like garbage collection, you can do that. Can you? Let's do it together. We can help you there. That's the message. You would like to clean your air? Let's do it together. You want to be more energy efficient? Let's do that together. In the EU and the US, the main focus is not on mutual reduction of duties. This is the system of rules, equivalent for different rules, reaching a certain goal, because it's like development of economy, not just welfare, and economic rules of the game. The technological process that we have the metric system, non-metric system with the US and the metric system with the EU. And we have different width for different tracks and different types, but this lowers the barriers at the board. High quality production, quality assurance. You should not look at the label to find out what the country of origin is. It should be in strict compliance with the requirement. So harmonization with the European Union is harmonization with the US, Canadian rules, and we have this our own negotiations with Canada. We understand that European Union is supermarkets. Our agreement with the Canadian party will not be that big, but it's a smaller contribution to creation of this global system and a position of Ukraine as part of this system, this global system. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for coming to us. Inspiration and stamina, is all you will need for this development. Thank you very much.